This video will cover the exercises and activities for Monday. You'll start off your day by creating teams. You can number students sequentially 1 through 5 and go around the room and watch out for students trying to shuffle themselves into the right position, but if you do it quickly enough, it shouldn't be an issue. Follow that up by introducing yourself. You want to tell them and give them a little bit of background, and as you can see here, I'm showing a picture of myself that I showed last year. Then go around the room and have the students present themselves. This is a good opportunity for you to find out who they are and for the rest of the group as well to find out about each other. Most of them will not know each other before the class, and so this is an opportunity for them to hear about interests, to hear names and so on. The other thing you want to ask as well is you want to ask them about hobbies. This is a fun way to get some insight as to who they are. And as you can see here, last summer, the most common hobby was dance. We then want to do an activity, an icebreaker activity. And this one comes here from the data collection group, and we want the students to draw a scientist. What you want to do is you can ask your TAs to hand out index cards to everybody around the room and give them some time to make the drawing. As I mentioned before, they love to draw. And once they're done, you can collect them and cluster them by patterns on the board. The other thing that we want to do as well is ask the TAs to take photos of each index card. If they have high enough resolution, you can take one. However, if the resolution is not great, you'll want to take a picture of every single one. And I'll come back to why we're doing that later. But this is a fun activity that, sort of relaxing and, and something that they can enjoy. Next, you'll want to do the introduction to beautiful patterns. This is a proxy that we're using for the word algorithm, and this is something that we'll carry out throughout the week. So many of the questions that you want to address or many of the issues you want to raise is, for example, in the previous exercise, were there any patterns in the work that was done? And what do we mean about a pattern? And in this case, we're thinking about design patterns. But before you get to that, you want to call out a lot of the patterns that are in everyday life. And this is an opportunity for them to participate as well, and they can bring out many different instances of patterns throughout the world. You can imagine that all of those that study dance can connect that in a very meaningful way. You'll also want to introduce the restaurant as a computer analogy. That is something that is a pretty gentle introduction into this field. Don't go into it too deep, but this is the type of question that you can pose onto the class. When you go out to eat with your parents, what typically happens? And you can start to sketch out the different components that take place or the different patterns that take place as you dine, and you can start to make parallels as to how a computer executes. You can also call out that in many disciplines, mastering a profession is mastering a set of domain patterns. The next big activity will be maximizing happiness. And this is something here where you can have, or we had a lot of fun last summer. There was a lot of giggling, and it's a topic that I think lends itself to fun. And you can explain the connection here to real life. The classic problem of you might like him, her, she may not like you. And there are levels of like for a pool of people, and you can imagine there that the challenge is how do you make sure that you can get the highest level of happiness for a group, right? And so this is the activity that they're going to carry out. You can distribute index cards, or sorry, in this case, you will be distributing the actual cards. These are the game cards. You will have the giant card and the small ones that indicate preferences. And you can see here how the scoring system is carried out. All of the materials will be in the classroom ready for you. You can see here a sample setup image, and there's also here the configuration for the entire exercise. This is too small to project, so I have a deck that's called cards.pptx in the folder called 01 Monday. Then what you want to do is you want to let the different groups compete against each other, and there will be a lot of discussion, there will be a lot of back and forth, and this will take some time. And they'll need pencil, they'll need paper, and so you want your TAs to walk around the room. Many of the types of questions that often came up is, can you repeat how the scoring is done? And you can start to support them as they think through this problem, which is not easy, right? The combinatorial nature of it. Now, once they're done, either because they ran out of time and there's no more time and you want to move on, or that they all got the highest score, you can move on to the next component. And the next component is presenting the Gale-Shapley algorithm. And here is where they get to see the simplicity of a recipe that they can apply to a problem and come up with a solution in a very, very structured way as opposed to what they've just been through. So you can see here that the algorithm is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Each of the queens proposes to their top choice. Each of the kings then take from that pool of proposals that each of them have their highest preference, and then those that are not selected go back to the general pool, lose that first choice, so that card is removed, and then another iteration happens where you once again, the queens propose to their highest choice, the kings then select from that pool, and you go on through iterations until you finish. So again, this is a very ordered, sequential, a recipe, an algorithm on how to do this. And so they can move through this pretty fast. Now, the last activity for the morning is where they take that knowledge they've just required and the context of that problem they've thought through, and then they apply this idea to a problem of their own choosing. And here is where they really shine. They come together, they like to work graphically, all of them go to the board, they use the different colored markers, and they think through the solution and the application. After which they decide on how they're going to do the presentation, which we'll ask them to do. And then once everybody's ready, you go around the room and ask them to present. And so the participants, all of them come to see the presentations of each group, which takes 5 minutes or so. And in total, it will take about an hour to go through this exercise. And so that wraps up the morning. Now, going on to the afternoon has a very different makeup. It is very structured. It is more like a computer lab. And the very first thing that you want to start off with is reminding them about the restaurant analogy. You want to take them through that gentle introduction of what a computer is and that we will be writing instructions that will be interpreted by the computer. The topics that we cover on that first day are HTML, CSS, screen coordinate systems. You want to talk about the z-index because you're looking at a flat monitor, yet you have depth. And ultimately, and finally, I should say, the properties on a div. Start out pretty gentle with a blank page where they can see how everything evolves and that they're not overwhelmed. And so I'll pull in here a page where we'll run through a quick exercise. I'll save it to my desktop simply as hello world. I'll just call it hello actually. .html, and we can start off by just writing hello world, and I'm going to go ahead and load that into the browser that I have here. And once you do, you can point out to them that this is some simple text that this interpreter, in this case the browser virtual machine, is simply rendering onto the screen without any type of modification. You can then add instructions, which in this case will be the h1 tag. And you can reload the page and show them how that is now different. You're now passing an instruction onto the computer, and it is saying, oh, okay, I know what this is, and I know how it should be rendered, and this is different. From there on, we move on to shapes. And before you have them do this exercise, talk about the coordinate system, talk about this element that it's a declarative element that you're writing onto the page, talk about the different properties that are part of it. You can see here the z-index, Don't worry about position absolute because that's a pretty browser dependent issue. But you can talk about the horizontal axis, the vertical axis. You can talk about width and height. You can talk about border radius and how these circles that you're showing could be squares, and background fill as well. You can see there the difference between the two shapes that I'm showing. One of them does not have a fill, the other one does. And I've added these samples onto the repo. You can see here one is called no fill, the other one is just ball, and then the other one is 8 ball. And I'm going to go ahead and load these onto the browser so you can see them. Here is the first. Here is the other one. Nope, that's the wrong one. I want to do this one here. And then the last one is the exercise for the day. And this has a certain geometry, it has a certain layering when it comes to the z-index, and it has a number of colors that they have to figure out as well. So this is a fun one to move through. It's visual. It's pretty easy to know whether you got it right or not because you can just look at the screen. Here is what I was mentioning about coordinates and something that you want to cover, particularly because down is negative, and for most of them, they will never have seen this before. Here's the exercise that I mentioned, and I wanted to show these here just in case somebody's moving pretty fast through the material and has some familiarity and they have no issue and they're flying through the editor, they're flying through all the tasks, and they want to be challenged. You can show them these and they can try to make them. And again, this has to do with geometry and how you lay things out on the page. You can also just create, one of the fun things to do is once you start creating shapes, is just create a bunch of them on the page in different shapes and sizes, and this is visually very appealing, right? The last part of this is Bootstrap. As you can see here, I'm writing in the path to where that code is. I've gone ahead and downloaded that file, that zip file, and I have it here. I'm going to go ahead and expand it. And what this is just a bunch of different templates for bootstraps. And the one that I'm going to go ahead and open up is carousel, as you can see there. I'm going to go ahead and load it onto the browser, just like I did before. And you'll see that it's called carousel because it has a bunch of slides you can think of that it's flipping through. You can see here you can navigate manually as well. And one of the fun things to do is to replace one of those slides. So I've downloaded an image as well that I have here, as you can see, image.jpg, and I'm going to copy it onto its own directory, to the same directory as the HTML file. I'm then going to go ahead and open up the HTML file, and this will be ugly. However, the powerful example here to show is that although there's a tremendous amount of complexity, if we want to change a background, we can do that selectively. So we can get partial functionality and changes without having to understand everything. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate down here to the very first slide, and I will enter image.jpg. I'm going to go ahead and save, and then if I reload this page, you can see there that now the first page is this pretty background of, I think it's flowers. Now the next thing after that is to point them to the project description. This was created by Sylvia last year, and it has pretty good details and deliverables and milestones that we are requiring throughout the week, and it is in that same folder within the website. And you can have them read through that once you get to the portion of the afternoon where they're going to start working on their group project. At this point, you're done. You should pat yourself on the back. You've gone through a long day. And there's a number of additional activities that we want. These are very short, less than 5 minutes each, that the data collection team will ask from you. And I will show you what those are. From the instructor, we want you to submit a reflection. Again, this will take 5 minutes, no more than that. We'll give you a link. Again, I'm not providing the links so that I can change them later. The same thing we will ask, the same thing of the TAs. And the last thing that we will ask is for the students to do the same. And in this portion, we're doing something new, very new, and is to request from them a 1-minute video that gives us a summary of what they saw that day. And so we will provide all the information on how you can do this. We also want to do an exercise that we call mud cards, and this is again, a 3-minute exercise where you hand out post-it notes. All of the students then respond, and we ask them, in the case of mud cards, write the one thing that you were most confused about this day. And this is something that you can collect and that you can see some of the patterns, and it's tremendously insightful for the instructor to see what landed, what did not land. And so with that, we close the day. We will give you more information when it comes to the reflections at the end of the day. We will follow up with careful details about how to carry these out, including videos. But that is all for the day. And I'll stop here.